For tonight or just all together?
No, for tonight.
No, no. It's the book of purification. We're going over um how to remove impurities. Now tonight, inshallah, we'll cover a lot of different stuff, but all right. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا اللهم زدنا علما إنك أنت عليم الحكيم اللهم اجعل هذه المحاضرة حجة لنا لا حجة علينا يا رب العالمين أما بعد. Today inshallah ta'ala, this is our 16th class in the book Zaad Al-Mustaq'ni, the Musa Hajjawi rahimahullah ta'ala. We reach the section Bab Izalat al-Najasa al-Hukmiyah. طيب. First of all, before we get started at this, how many ways can we clean impurities? How many ways can we do that? This mic hold. Connect that. How many ways can we do that? Just pass this around. How many ways? How many ways can we purify something that is impure? How many ways do we do that? We don't do it. One way. Okay. One way. Like, anybody else? It's two. Three. What's the one way? With water. Okay. So here, today, inshallah, we're going to cover 4 ways to cleanse impurities, if you will. 4 ways to cleanse impurities. The first way, and this is a quick synopsis, and we're going to go through the text, inshallah. All right? So the first way is something called a nadah. A nadah is like sprinkling water on something. Like sprinkling water on something, right? A nadah fi najasat bowl al-gulam. So let's say, for example, you have a child that does not eat solid foods yet. A child that still breastfeeds. A breastfeeding child, right? A breastfeeding child you do not need to make like wash. You can just sprinkle the impurities, urine, etc., with water. You sprinkle it, right? It says, وَهُوَ تَعْمِيمٌ مَا دَامَ لَا يَسِيلُ, as long as it's not dripping, drenched, or something like that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Right. That's the first way. The second way is غسلٌ واحدة, washing something one time. So, for example, assuming impurities got onto the carpet, they say that you can wash it one time, right? The next one, or the third one, is سبع غسلات نجاسة الكلب والخنزير, washing something 7 times if a dog or a pig touched it. For example, hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, إِذَا وَلَغَ الْكَلْبُ فِي إِنَاءِ أَحَدِكُمْ, right? If a dog were to lick inside of a bowl, then you wash it 7 times. وَأُولَهُنَّ بِالتُّرَابِ, and the first of them is with dirt. We're going to discuss, I think it's important because we live in a society where dogs are prevalent, right? A lot of people have dogs. In the past, I think I made a mistake when I spoke about dogs. I was only speaking from one perspective, and that perspective was, see, most of what we teach, if not 99% of what we teach, is Hanbali fiqh, right? But I think in this particular issue, I lean closer to the method of Imam Malik. And we're going to talk about that because sometimes if I speak on this issue, I'm like, no, you could do this. But in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is the way Imam Malik understood the issue. And we're going to talk about that in clarity for everyone. But according to Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal rahimahullah ta'ala, a dog is najis. A dog is what? Najis, impure. So with that being said, we're going to begin to touch on some of those topics in a little bit, inshallah. And it says, وَمَا سِوَى ذَلِكَ, and anything other than a dog or a pig or washing a location, then according to the method of Imam Ahmed, likewise, you wash those things 7 times. You wash those things 7 times. And in some narrations, 3 times. And in other narrations, it's 1 time. Any questions about that before we get into the text?
Yes, you said that you wash, if a dog or a pig was to lick inside of a bowl, that you wash it 7 times and once with dirt. Was that what you said?
That's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It says, "Ulahunna bit-tarab," meaning you take some dirt, rub it out, and then you wash it out 7 times. We're going to cover all of that in detail when we start going through the text. Any questions? My fish. Khalas. It says, قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى يجزئ في غسل النجاسات كلها إذا كان على أرض غسلة واحدة. So it says, يجزئ في غسلة النجاسات. It is sufficient to clean off impurities, right? All of it. إذا كانت على الأرض غسلة واحدة. If there's any type of impurity that touches the ground or an area that we need cleansed, it is sufficient for us to pour water on it. Ghasl najazat ghaslatan wahidatan, meaning it is sufficient to clean that area 1 time. 1 time. That it will be sufficient to clean that area 1 time. And then he says, tudhibu bi'ain najasa, for the purpose of removing the source of the impurity, be it urine, feces, etc. Is that clear?
No.
So we just spoke about that briefly. Any questions about that? No questions. Everyone's silent. Thank you. All right, cool. And it says, وَعَلَى غَيْرِهَا سَبْعٌ. Anything outside of that, meaning outside of a location, a place, you wash it 7 times. إحداهن بالتراب في نجاسة القلب الكلب والخنزير. We wash it 7 times. The first with dirt, if it has to do with a dog or a pig. In the past, I mentioned if a dog licks you or whatever, wash it off. You don't got to wash it 7 times, etc. Right? However, many of the ulama hold the position that you wash it 7 times as well. But we're going to get into another position here. We're gonna save that towards the end of the class. We're gonna yufukka mas'ala shwaya. We're gonna open up the issue so that everybody can see the different wajah to the different wujuh an-nadhar, and how everyone else could potentially look at the issue. Huh?
So you said if there's a spot, for instance, that has najasa, right, from a dog or the likes, right? Then you said anything outside of that, then you wash it 7 times.
No. So the first thing we said was if it's a place, a location. So let's say a location is saturated with impurities, right? It only takes 1 washing to clean it. If it is something that we are referring to that has to be impurities from a dog or a cat, then I'm not a cat, I'm sorry, a dog or a pig, in that regard, then you wash it 7 times, the first time with dirt. All right. And like I said, we're going to speak about that when we get to that point, inshallah. It says, وَيُجْزِئُ عَنْ تَرَابْ أَشْنَانُ نَحْوِ. It says also, if you don't use dirt, then they say soap is also a replaceable thing to use. Wallahu alam. It says, وَفِي نَجَاسَةِ غَيْرِهِمَا سَبْعٌ بِلَا تُرَابٍ. It says, if there are other impurities besides a pig or a dog, then you wash it 7 times without using dirt. Without using dirt. Does that make sense? This is the madhab of Imam Ahmed as it relates to these issues here. Okay, so it says, وَفِي نَجَاسَةٍ غَيْرِهِمَا. Any type of impurity that is not a pig or a dog, any type of impurity that's not a pig or a dog, then you wash it 7 times without using dirt. Wa alaikum salam. Water.
She said, what is considered a wash? She said, do you need to throw water?
No, I hear what she's saying. I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you wipe it along with throwing water on it? Do you just throw water on it?
So when you wash something, the term wash is something that's known to everyone. When you wash something, maybe you will put water on it, rub it, etc., but wash it. Does that make sense? Or are you asking just dump water on? Dumping water on is not necessarily considered washing, right? Say again.
Maybe she was meaning like you put soap on it, wash it.
Yeah, you wash it. You wash it.
I think she was asking whether to put water on it. Is that sufficient, or to wash it and put water on it?
But how do you wash it without putting water on it?
No, understood. I was just giving my perspective.
Right. Now I was just wondering. I don't know. I mean, hopefully, I hope that was clear. But if not, we'll continue along. And if it's not clear, we'll come back to it, inshallah. All right. So, are we clear on the first part? All right. So, who can explain to me the different parts of impurities and how to clean them real quick?
So the first one is another sprinkling.
Another. Not nada. Another.
Another.
Yeah, I'm only doing that because you're studying Arabic.
No,
Another.
and so that's sprinkling water
Mm-hmm.
on the area.
So sprinkling water on an area or place that a child, a gulam, a child that does not eat solid foods. And some say not just any child, has to be a male child, a gulam. A male child that, and this is different hadith to support this, a male child that does not eat solid food. So the child is still breastfeeding. So a breastfeeding child that is a young child that's not eating solid foods, that's breastfeeding. In that regard, you can sprinkle nadh. You can sprinkle water on the area, and that will suffice, inshallah. What's the next one?
Washing something one time.
Washing something one time, like a location. So when we say wash one time, like if we come back to that, wash it one time, pour water on the area, ghuslatan wahida. So I think what's understood, if they say wash it 3 times, wash it, maybe pouring water in, doing some action with the hands along with it, if need be. If that was the question. Okay, I'm sorry. All right. So the next one, if you wash the area one time, right? As long as tudhibu ayn an-najasa, as long as the eye, if you will, of the impurity is removed, as long as the source of the impurity is removed, right? The third one is what?
She said 6.
What's 6?
She said 6.
6 what? No, it was 7.
7 times.
Right? So you wash something 7 times. However, some of the ulama say, if you explain it, 6 washes, 1 with dirt.
Okay.
Right? Maybe that's what she intends. At any event, the hadith says, sab'a ghasalat. It says 7 times, right? You wash it 7 times. This is when if a dog or a pig licks into a bowl. This is a hadith. Many of the ulama say this is for anything that they touch or affect, if you will, a dog or a pig. Now, we're going to come back to this, though. We're going to come back to the dog because according to Imam Ahmed, rahimahullah ta'ala, a dog is impure. a pig is impure and a dog is what? Impure. They say, what's impure about the dog? Is it the fur? It's the fur, it's the tongue, it's the teeth, it's the breath. Everything about a dog is najis according to the school of Imam Ahmed. Is that clear?
No.
All right, we're going to come back to that though. Yes. And then the last part was washing something seven times that is not a dog or a pig. So therefore you're not using dirt.
No.
All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the next part here. We're going to try to quickly go through this section, and then we're going to come back and delve into the issue of the dog, right? Because I think that's very important. It affects probably a lot of people. You may go to family members' houses and there's dogs, etc. All right. So the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, any questions before we continue? Right. The author says, La yatharu mutanajjisun bi shamsin. So let's assume that a person, there is urine on a thobe, on a garment, on a piece of material, right? You leave it outside in the sun. It says, La yatharu mutanajjisun bi shams. If you leave something out in the sun, it's not going to become cleansed by the heat from the sun. That's number one. Wala rihin. And if it was wind that came through and blew on it, it will not cleanse the impurity. Wala dalkin. Even if you try to like scratch it off, if it's dried up, you try to scratch it off, it still does not remove the impurity. Wala istihalatan ghayru khamrin. Even if so, here's a question. Is there something that is impure that will eventually become pure by itself? Is there something that's considered najis but can become pure by itself? Anything?
No.
Water.
Water?
Water's not impure.
Water don't start off as being impure.
Oh, no.
There's something that starts off as pure, then listen. There's something that starts off as pure, then becomes najis, then become pure again. Huh?
No.
Shake.
Naturally, like
Naturally.
somebody-
Starts off as pure, then becomes najis, then becomes pure again all by itself. You ready? Grapes. Grapes, which is a fruit, starts off as being what?
Pure.
Pure. If you sit it out long enough, it's going to turn to what? It's
Impure.
going to turn to alcohol. And if you sit it out longer than that, it's going to turn to what? Vinegar. Right? So it says, وَلَسْتَحَالَةً غَيْرُ خَمْرٍ. Shuf how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows the things to change like that. So then if the alcohol changes by itself and becomes vinegar, then it's haram. But if someone added to it to change it to that, then it's haram. It says, "Oh, tanajjasa duhnun ma'in." So let's say, for example, someone has some grease or oil, and some impurities went into it, urine, feces, etc. If it mixes with that oil, there's no way you can remove that impurity. It's no way. It says lam yathurik. There's no way you can remove it. وَإِنْ خَفِيَ مَوْضِعُ النَّجَاسَةِ غُسِلَ حَتَّى يَجْزَمْ بِزَوَالِهِ. If we have an area where we are questioning whether or not, say for example, we have a thobe, and we question whether or not there are impurities inside of that thobe or in that thobe, then you take and wash the whole thobe until you are certain that the impurities are removed. Is that clear? All right. The next one says, وَيَطْهَرُ بَوْلُ غُلَامٍ لَمْ يَأْكُلَ الطَّعَامِ بِنَضْحِهِ. We already talked about that. You purify the urine of a baby boy that doesn't eat by sprinkling water on it. It says, وَيُعْفَى فِي غَيْرِ مَاءٍ وَمَطْعُونٍ عَنْ يَسِيرٍ دَمٍ نَجِسٍ مِنْ حَيَوَانٍ طَاهِرٍ. So now they're going to talk about what is the type of impurity that you may be pardoned for having. There may be some small inklings of impurities that may be around that there's a pardon for. From those things is a small amount of blood from an animal that is pure. So let's say, for example, if you're slaughtering an animal, a little bit of blood get on you, it's not considered to be najis, right? It says, "O atharin istijmar bimahallihi," or if a person uses toilet paper to wipe themselves, and perhaps there's some remnants left, and a person did the minimum of how many? Those that attend the class, what's the minimum of wipes?
3.
3. So if a person did the minimum of wipes, they wipe themselves, and there's a small negligible remnants remaining, then this is ma'fu'an, meaning a person is pardoned for having that. However, it is always better to use water and wipe if you're able, inshallah ta'ala. Right. It says, the next one he says, and he says, fi mahallihi, meaning as long as that did not spread away from the area of source, meaning when you're using the bathroom, if it hits your leg or something, that's a different story, right? Right. It says, wala yanjus al-adami bil-maut. A person does not become najis if they die, right? A believer does not become najis when they die. وَلَا نَفْسَ لَهُ سَائِلَةٌ مُتَوَلِّدْ مِنْ طَاهِرٍ. And so here, likewise, a fly or something like that does not become impure. A fly is not considered impure. A person will say, well, I don't know about that. Flies, one wing of a fly has a disease and the next wing has the what? The cure. Kama qala Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam mentioned. He says, وَبَوْلُ مَا يُؤْكَلُ لَحْمُهُ وَمَنِيُّهُ وَرَوْثُهُ وَمَنِيُّ الْآدَمِ طَاهِرٌ. All right. وَرَطُوبَةٌ فَرْجَ الْمَرْأَةِ طَاهِرَةٌ. All right. So here we're going to mention a list of things that are considered pure. And once we finish all this, we're going to go back to the dog. All right. I think that's very important. So the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, bowl, urine, ma yukalu lahmuhu. So urine from an animal that we eat their meat. Wa maniyuhu, and sperm from an animal that we eat their meat. Wa rothuhu, and feces from an animal that we eat their meat. Wa maniyun adami, and sperm from a human. Right? Wa rutubata farj al-mar'a, and the moisture that comes from the private parts of a woman. The moisture that comes out, all of that is considered pure and it's not considered impure. All right? But you still have to what? Make wudu. For example, if anything kharaja min as-sabilain, anything that comes out of the two private areas, you still must make wudu, but it's not considered najis. It's not considered najis. Is that clear? Huh? Right. The next one he says, وَالسُّؤْرُ حِرًّا وَمَا دُونَهَا فِي الْخِلْقَةٍ طَاهِرًا. Likewise, a cat, the spit, saliva of a cat, and anything smaller than that is considered pure. But anything bigger than that is considered najis. For example, siba'ul baha'im, any predatory animals, cats, lions, etc., they're all considered impure when it comes to those things, right? Likewise, a mule, a donkey, etc. Now, we're going to go back to the issue that I think is relevant for where we live. We're going to kind of delve into this a little bit in some detail. Before we do that, I would like to clarify the position of Imam Ahmed on this issue, because it's the issue that is well known, right? So the issue of Imam Ahmed, rahimahullah ta'ala, it says, we're going to read some of the hadith on this issue. It says, Rawa Muslim. So now we're going to get into some text, right? We're going to get into hadith, etc., and speak about this issue in some detail. It says, روى مسلم عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم طهور إناء أحدكم إذا ولغ فيه الكلب أن يغسله سبع مرات أولاهن بالتراب. In this hadith that we find in Sahih Muslim, the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, purify. Remember this word here, purify. He said, purify ina'i ahadikum, clean. Now, when we use the word purify something, how do we do that? Purification when what? Use purification for something that is najis or something that is muhdith, meaning you have to purify yourself. You as a human can't be najis, but you are what? Muhdith, meaning you need to make wudu, either a minor ablution or a major. Is that clear? So then, once again, as humans, we are muhdith, something that is not human, like your thawb, your garments. It may be najis, maybe a urine touched it, etc. In that case, it requires what? Purification. Many of the scholars of Islam say purification is used for those two things, something that is najis or something that is what? Muhdith. Remember that, because we're going to come back to that when we start looking at the different madahib. So it says, purify your bowl, one of you, if a dog licks in it, you wash it 7 times, the first of which is with dirt. The first of which is with dirt. That's clear, right? And another narration in Muslim, عن عبد الله بن مغفل قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا ولغ الكلب في الإناء فاغسلوه 7 مرات وعفروه 8 في التراب. In this case, it says wash it, same thing, wash it 7 times, and then the 8th time is with dirt. It says, وفي هذين الحديثين بين النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كيفية تطهير نجاسة الكلب. So in this particular, these two hadith, the scholars of the school of Imam Ahmed, it's already understood that these dogs is what? Najis, based off the hadith, right? It says purify. Purify is for what? Something that is what? Either muhdith, a bowl can't be muhdith, right? Because that's for humans, or the bowl must be what? Najis. So therefore, it needs to be purified. And therefore the dog is what? Najis, right? It says, قال ابن قدام رحمه الله تعالى في المغني لا يختلف المذهب أن نجاسة الكلب يجب غسلها 7. So Ibn Qudama, he says in a book called Al-Mughni, there's no difference in the madhab that a dog is najis or impure dog that you have to wash it 7 times. The first of which is with dirt. And this is also a statement of Imam Ash-Shafi'i kadhalik. Likewise, there's also a position of Imam Ash-Shafi'i. And likewise, Imam An-Nawawi, rahimahullah, he's also from the scholars of Imam Ash-Shafi'i. He says, وَقَدْ اخْتَلَفَ عُلَمَاء فِي وُلُوغِ الْكَلْبِ فَمَذْهَبُنَا أَنْ يَنْجِسْ مَا وَلَغَ فِيهِ. He said that some of the scholars differ on what this means if a dog licks into the bowl. He said, however, our madhab, meaning the madhab of Imam Ash-Shafi'i, is that the thing that he licks in becomes najis, etc. Right? Then we have another hadith. عن أبي هريرة وابن عباس وعروة والزبير وطاووس وعمر بن دينار ومالك وأوزاعي وأحمد وإسحاق وأبي أبي وثوري قال منذر وبه أقوى. All of them generally hold this position. And then there's a statement, Shaykh Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, إذا كانت النجاسة على غير الأرض وهي نجاسة الكلب. He said, if there are impurities that are not on the ground, and it's impurities of a dog, I see you got on your clothes or something like that. فإنه لا بد لتطهيرها من 7 غسلات. So if a dog urined or some type of impurity from a dog touched your garments, you must wash it 7 times. 7 غسلات إحداهما بالتراب. إحداها بالتراب. The first of which is with dirt. We also find another narration here. It says أفضل أن تكون غسلة الأولى هي التي بالتراب. It says it's better to use the first wash with dirt. It says فإن جعل التراب في غيرها حصل المقصود وطهر المكان. Even he says, then you make the first wash. If it's suitable to cleanse the area, then this is sufficient, right? Then it says, according to Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says the same thing. So here they're talking about now how to clean the area in which a dog licked on, right? they're not, the dispute here is not whether or not a dog is impure. It's almost like it's a foregone conclusion that a dog is impure. A dog is najis. So therefore, how do we purify that thing that is najis, right? So then we have another statement, another position. It says, Alhamdulillah. It says, فَقَوْ بِأَنَّ مَنْ رَأَى خِيَالَ الْكَلْبِ انتقض وضوءه قول باطل لا قال به من أئمة المعتبرين ونسبة هذا قول الإمام أحمد من etc. And then it says, أن اللمس الكلب ليس ناقضا للوضوء. Some people think that even if a dog licks your hand, it breaks your wudu. This is not the case. This is not the case. وكذا لعاب الكلب ليس ناقضا للوضوء أيضا ولكن من أصابه شيء من لعاب الكلب فالواجب عليه أن يغسل ما أصابه منه من بدنه أو ثوبه 7 مرات أولاهن بالتراب. They say that if a dog licks you, I've said in the past that you don't have to do this, but according to this position here, you have to. If a dog licks you, etc., you wash it 7 times and 1 time with dirt, right? And then he says, وَإِذَا وَلَغَ الْكَلْبُ فِي إِنَاءِ أَحَدِكُمْ فَلْيَغْسِلْهُ 7 أُولَاهُنَّ بِالتُّرَابِ. If a dog licks into a bowl, you wash it 7 times, the first of which is with dirt. This is all assuming that a dog is what? Najis. Any questions about that? All right.
So if he lick you,
According to, now listen, majority of the scholars of Islam consider a dog to be najis. Majority. When I speak about this issue, most of the time, I usually tend to speak from the school of Imam Malik on this issue. On this issue. I'm not saying my position is the position. I'm just saying that it makes sense to me. I follow the position of Imam Malik on that particular issue because it makes sense to me, but I could be wrong. All right. So it says, فلا فرق بين النجاسة من بلوغ الكلب أو يده أو رجله أو شعره أو غير ذلك من أجزائه لأن حكم كل جزء من أجزاء الحيوان حكم بقية أجزائه. And so they say that, according to Ibn Qudam, he says, there's no difference between impurities if a dog licks, the licking of a dog on the hand, on the leg, in your hair, anything of the body. It takes the same ruling that this is how it should be cleaned.
So you, what I believe you're saying is that it doesn't break your wudu, but you have to wash it.
That's like saying, of course, it doesn't break your wudu, but you have to cleanse the area. Right? Any questions about that? Yes.
I thought animals with fur is pure.
Not all animals.
Is it just a dog? Or
So right now, we're not, because that's a whole nother topic, animals with fur, right? We're talking about, this hadith is specifically speaking about dogs. All right. And the reason why I'm specifying this topic here is because we have dogs all around us. And we need to know the ruling as it pertains to dogs. As far as cats, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, he mentioned that a cat is not najis. Cats are pure, etc. But this hadith is specifically speaking about dogs. Many scholars of Islam consider dogs to be najis. Some scholars go so far as to say if a dog touches you, the fur of the dog, as long as it is dry, then that impurity does not go off into you. But if a dog is wet and you touch, then you have to go through the whole process of purifying yourself if you consider the dog to be najis. Are we clear on that?
Well,
all right. Right. We're going to talk about the next issue, inshallah, in some detail. We're going to get into the position of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, on this issue. So it says, ذهب جمهور أهل العلم إلى نجاسة لعاب الكلب. Majority of the scholars of Islam consider a dog licking, the licking of a dog on anything is impure. وجوب تطهيرها مسه هذا اللعاب. Anything that saliva or spit touches has to be cleansed. قال ابن قدام رحمه الله. And we're going to read through a lot of statements of the scholars of the past on this, so brace yourself. You need to stop because I feel like we need to get a little more detailed on this, right? It says, قال ابن قدامة الحنبلي رحمه الله تعالى فالنجس نوعان أحدها ما هو النجس رواية واحد وهو كلب. He said, najasa or impurities are two types. He says, the first type, ما هو النجس. What is najis? رواية واحد وهو كلب. He said, what is najis here is a dog. وخنزير وما تولد منهما. A dog and a pig and anything that comes from both of them. أو من أحدهما or from one of them. فهذا نجس عينه. That is najis with the eye, meaning a dog itself is najis. وصؤره, spit, anything. وجميع ما خرج منه, anything that comes from a dog. روى ذلك عن عروة وهو مذهب الشافعي. So this is reported on Urwa. That is also reported from Imam al-Shafi'i وأبي أبي وهو قول أبي حنيفة, and it's also a position of Abu Hanifa. في الصورة خاصة, in the spit or the saliva particularly. And then we're going to mention their evidence. واستدل والجمهور على ذلك بحديث أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال إن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا شرب الكلب في الإناء أحدكم فليغسله سبعا. In this hadith, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, he said that if a dog drinks from your bowl, فَلْيَغْسِلْهُ سَبْعًا, wash the bowl 7 times. Right? This hadith you can find in Sahih al-Bukhari. And another hadith, إِذَا وَلَغَ الْكَلْبُ فِي إِنَاءِ فَلْيُرِقْهُ. If a dog licks into a bowl, you throw it out. ثُمَّ لِيَغْسِلْهُ سَبْعَ مَرَّاتٍ. And then you wash it 7 times. And then another narration, purify the bowl, etc. Right? So according to all of this, a dog is what? Najis. It says, وَدَلَالَةُ الْحَدِيثِ دَلَّ عَلَى نَجَاسَةِ اللُّعَابِ الْكَلْبِ مِنْ وُجُوهٍ. So now the early matter mentioning these hadith shows that a dog is impure, and now they're going to show you how, based on the evidence that's used, right? You want to go through that? Did I lose anybody? Type.
But you did say it's 2 types. Was that the first type?
No, we just
Okay.
I don't even know if he mentioned the first type. Nope, he only mentioned, so here they only mentioned that one type. Yeah, that was from Ibn Qudama. We passed Ibn Qudama now. Now we're gonna it says the wajh al-awwal انه جاء في أوله طهور إناء أحدكم إذا ولغ فيه الكلب. Purify your cup if a dog licks in it. والطهارة حقيقتها في الشرع هو الطهارة ما في من الحدث والخبث. Remember this. We already mentioned that, right? Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam used the term purify. Remember, we said purify is only used for hadith and khabith, impurities and muhdith. If a person has to make wudu or a ghusl. Is that clear? That's the first position. قال النووي رحمه الله تعالى فيه دلالة الظاهرة لمذهب الشافعي وغيره رضي الله تعالى عنه مما يقول بنجاسة الكلب لأن الطهارة تكون عن حدث أو نجس وليس هما حدث فتعين النجس. So here Imam al-Shafi, Imam al-Nawawi says the same thing. He says purification can only be from what? 2 things. Something that is najis or something that is hadith, like if you have to make wudu. This is why we need the purifier, right? Why are they focusing on the term purify? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, purify your bowl. Why would he use the word purify? Purify means what? 1 or 2 things. It can't be muhdith because the bowl can't make wudu. So it has to be because the bowl is khabith or najis. Is that clear? Right. We can get into all the positions of that, and we're not going to do that. Any questions about that so far? Right. Now we're going to speak about the position of Imam Malik. The position of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, is an issue I had a lot of trouble with when I was in school. Obviously, we studied the school of Imam Ahmed, and for many years, dog is najis, until we started studying Bab al-Sayd. And still we studied the chapter of hunting. And when we got to the chapter of hunting, we found that Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam would use the dogs to hunt. When they would say Bismillah and send the dogs out to hunt the animal, they didn't wash the area and put dirt in it. Rather, they ate the food that the dogs brought forth. That was one of the arguments. So here we're going to talk about this issue a bit here. It says, Al-Mashhur min aqwali Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, anna lu'ab al-kalb laysa bi najasan. According to Imam Malik, the saliva or the dog licking is not najis. وَإِنَّمَا يَغْسِلُ إِنَاءَ الَّذِي وَلَغَ فِيهِ تَعَبُّدًا. He says, when the Prophet ﷺ told him that the dog, if a dog licks into a bowl, that you have to wash it 7 times, he said, this is done ta'abbudan, meaning we don't know the reason why he said it. We hear, we do it, and we obey. Now understand something. If you find a hadith and you say it's ta'abbudan, that means you can't use the meaning of the hadith for something else. Is that clear? Right now we're studying a little bit of usul al-fiqh here. If you use a hadith and you say this hadith here is ta'abbudan, meaning we don't know the reason why Allah or His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it, therefore we can't apply this ruling to something else. We cannot apply it to something else. Is that clear? Right. So then he says, قال ابن عبد البر رحمه الله تعالى واختلف فقهاء أيضا في سور الكلب وما ولغ فيه من الماء والطعام. It says, so some of the scholars differ as it relates to the spit or saliva of a dog, if they lick into something, etc. So it says, فجملة ما ذهب إليه مالك واستقر عليه مذهبه عند أصحابه أن سور الكلب طاهر. According to Malik, the saliva of a dog is pure. وَيَغْسِلُ إِنَاءٍ مِنْ وَلُوغِهِ سَبْعًا تَعَبُّدًا. In this book called Al-Tamheed, and this is from the major books of the Maliki school of fiqh, it says that the dog's saliva is considered pure. It says, وَيَغْسِلُ إِنَاءٍ. However, we must wash a vessel 7 times ta'abbudan, meaning we do it because we hear and we obey, not because we believe that the dog is najis. واضح؟ طيب. It says, Yandur al-Muqaddimat li-Ibn Rushd. You also go find this in Ibn Rushd, likewise, Maliki. It says, now we're going to look at some of the dalil, right? It says, Dalil al-awwal, al-ayah allati nassat alayha al-akil, where Allah says, فَكُلُوا مِمَّا أَمْسَكْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ وَاذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ. Allah says, eat from the things that you have grabbed and mention Allah's name over it. This is in Surah Al-Ma'idah. When we send those dogs out to hunt, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't tell them to what? Wash the saliva from the dog, right? قال ابن رشد رحمه الله تعالى فذهب مالك في الأمر بإراقة سور الكلب وغسل إناء من إلى أن ذلك إبادة وغير معللا. Imam Malik say, if a dog licks in, you dump it out and you wash it out, but it doesn't mean that it's najis. We do this out of worship, ta'abbudan, right? He says, إن الماء الذي بلغ فيه ليس بنجس. He said, the water that he licked in is not najis, according to Imam Malik. ولم يرى إراقته ما عدا الماء من الأشياء التي يلغ فيها الكلب في المشهور عنه. It's also famous on him that anything other than, it says ما عدا الماء من الأشياء التي, basically you toss the water, etc. Right? It says وَلِإِنَّهُ ظَنَّ أَيْضًا أَنَّهُ إِنْ فَهِمَ مِنْهُ أَنَّ الْكَلْبَ نَجِسَ الْعَيْنِ عَارِضَةٌ ظَاهِرَةٌ الْكَلْبِ هو قوله تعالى فَكُلُوا مِمَّا أَمْسَكْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ يريد أنه لو كان نجس العين لنجس الصيد بمماسته. He said, if they believed that the dog was najis, it would have made the dog najis just by the dog touching the food, and we wouldn't be able to eat the food that the dogs hunt. When we studied this in school, this issue was problematic for me, right? And then it says, وَأُجِيب, it says, بأن لعاب الكلب عفي عنه في هذه الحالة للحاجة. قال الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية لعاب الكلب إذا أصاب الصيد لم يجب غسله في أظهر قولي العلماء. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he said that if a dog licks or slaughters an animal for you, he says that you don't have to wash it because it says لم يجب غسله في أظهر قولي. In the most famous of 2 positions of the scholars, وهو إحدى الروايتين عن أحمد, and in one of the positions of Imam Malik or Imam Ahmed, لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لم يأمر أحدا بغسل ذلك, because the Prophet ﷺ didn't command anyone to wash the meat of the animal. فقد عفى عن لعاب الكلب. Perhaps he excused them from the saliva of the animal, right? طيب. In another narration, it says, عن عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنه قال كانت الكلاب. Now this is the part that also becomes problematic. There's a hadith in Sahih Bukhari. Now mind you, if the dog was najis or impure, there's hadith in Sahih Bukhari. كانت الكلاب تبول وتقبل وتدبر في المسجد في زمان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فلم يكونوا يرشون شيئا من ذلك. This is the ishkal. This hadith here, it said that dogs would urinate and they would come in and out of the masjid during the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And he said we did not see anyone throwing water or pouring water on it. Everyone's silent. Like, what? Right. Now, understand something. In the masajid, people would eat, they would congregate, they would gather, etc. And the hadith here, it says, kanat al-kilab. Kanat, it means this is something that used to happen frequently, not one time. Anytime you find a hadith of the Prophet, ﷺ, it would say, Kana Nabiyyu sallallahu alayhi wa sallam yaf'alu kada. A Nabi ﷺ, he used to do this, used to do it. This means this was something that was normal. When you find a hadith that says kanat al-kilab, that means the dogs used to frequent the masjid, come in and out, leave and exit the masjid. And it says, فاستدلوا بهذا الحديث أن أبوال الكلاب إذا كانت لا تغسل لا تغسل من المسجد فهذا دليل على طهارتها. He said the dog, if they didn't wash the urine from the dogs in the masjid, then this would mean that the dog had to be pure. وَدَلِيلُ عَلَى طَهَارَةِ لُعَابِهَا مِنْ بَابْ أَوْلَى. And then this means that the saliva from, if they didn't wash the urine up, then the saliva is from, is they say from bab أَوْلَى, meaning if the urine is worse than the saliva. So if they didn't wash the urine, then what about the saliva?
Yeah.
Makes
So
sense?
this is from the evidence that's sprung from Imam Malik.
Yes, from his, but see, no one ever heard this stuff. So I this is why I felt like we needed to introduce some of this. كما إنه let's see, what else do we have? طيب. طيب. So this is how we are going to wrap it up, inshallah, with the two positions, because there's a lot of positions on the dog, right? According to the school of Imam Imam Malik, the dog is not najis. That means the fur is not najis, the saliva is not najis. If they believe that the dog is not najis. If the dog is not najis, then those rulings don't apply. If you do consider the dog to be najis, according to everything that we heard before, then if a dog licks on you, you must what? Use dirt, wash it 7 times, etc. Many of the ulama, particularly the ones that we studied with, they will say, treat the dog as if it's najis. That way there's no khilaf. It's called khurujan min al-khilaf, staying away from the difference of opinion. No one's going to tell you if a dog licks you or what have you, and you wash it 7 times and put a little dirt on it, whatever. No one's going to tell you now that the garment is not pure, right? However, it's quite possible. You may find some people say, oh, akhi, that's still najis. I'm not right. I'm not letting you leave me in salat, right? I'm going to go, etc. So I say all this to say, according to the school of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, when it comes to the dog, right, they do not see the dog to be najis. That's number one. Number two, they mention their evidence. The evidence is strong. It's not something you just look at lightly. And believe you me, and the only reason I don't usually mention differences of opinions amongst the school of thoughts, you will rarely hear me talk about the difference, because this can get you. It's like you're swimming in the ocean now, because now they got answers to that, and then they got answers to that, and then they got answers to that, and then you'll be in that issue for a month, right? My goal was not for us to go into that issue for a month, but to give you a little bit from here and a little bit from there. So what you need to know is that Imam Malik khalafa jamhur, meaning he goes against the majority of the scholars of Islam on this issue.
Is that Shad?
No, it's not Shad. It's just called khalafa jamhur. He goes against the majority. Imam Malik goes against the majority of scholars of Islam on this issue. You heard his evidence. It's pretty strong. They got answers to those evidences, just like their answers for the other ones. So I'll give an example. the Maliki scholars, they're going to look at the evidence from Imam Ahmed and the majority of the scholars, and they're going to say, okay, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam say, either walag al kalbu fil ina, if a dog licks into a bowl. He didn't say if a dog touched you. And then they say, well, let's go back to that word. Remember the word purification?
No.
All right. How do you deal with that? Remember?
No.
And I'm glad I just remembered that. So another issue here, another strong piece of evidence that the Maliki scholars use is that word purification. And Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, Tahiru ina'akum. Okay, maqal alayhi salatu wasalam. Purify the vessel that a dog licks in. We said purification is for what?
No. Najasa.
Najasa or death. Right? Are we clear on that? So that sounds like an argument against the Maliki scholars, right?
No.
That sounds like an argument against the Maliki scholars, right? So they got an answer to that. Their answer to that is, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said, Tahir al-fim, purify your mouth with the miswak. He used the word tahir, right? Purify your mouth with the miswak. Question: do we have najas in our mouths? No. Is our mouth muhdith? No. So then the early Malikiya say what? This here is called al-qadar. Al-qadar is like something that is dirty, not impure. Just because something is dirty doesn't necessitate that is what? Impure. So they say, based on that term, when they say tahir, doesn't mean impurities here. It just means clean. So when the Prophet ﷺ said tahir ina'akum, meaning it just means clean out the inside of it. Doesn't mean that it's not just. And to the end of it. When you look at these differences of opinions, it's like a ocean. I just felt that it was important that we touched on some of that to give some clarity to it, if it did provide clarity. But it's safer, as many scholars say, it's safer to just stay away from the differences of opinion and stick to, the lack of differing, because you don't want to question whether or not you have purification if a dog licks on you. However, the reason why I thought to mention the Maliki position, because that may be a hardship on a lot of people here. You may live in a house with family members that have dogs. And it's like, wait a minute, like that means I can't even move. I'm living in a box, right? Well, there's a position that is slightly different. And this is why it's important for people to know. This is why sometimes we mention differences of opinion, because it's important to know your audience, to know our people, to know how we live here in the States. It's not like in the land of the Muslims where there are hardly any dogs. People have dogs in their houses, right? At any event, we're going to stop with that. Anyone have any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Imam Malik, he brought an ayat in Surah Ma'idah. Which one was that? Which ayat number was that?
I think it was ayat number 4.
4.
Mm-hmm. Right. Any other questions? I lost you.
No. I'm fine. I just want to ask a question, though.
Go ahead. Now, I might not know the answer, though.
No. I just want to get it clear. So you said the figure Imam Ahmed, if he lick you or lick the clothes, they got to get washed.
Yes, 7 times. It doesn't break your wudu. So according to the scholars of Imam Ahmed, it does not break your wudu. But what it does do is impurities that's on you. So they say wash it 7 times, or the first with dirt and wash it 7 times.
So just say, okay, by the figure Imam Ahmed, if he say a dog licked you.
Hold on. And the reason why I'm saying this, I taught this class like 4 years ago, the same book. And if I'm not mistaken, at that time, I don't think I supported the position of Imam Ahmed. Not that I do now, but I need to clarify both. Because somebody may say, well, what if it is impure in real life? So now I said, all right, well, you don't have to wash it with dirt. You just keep moving because it's not najis. I don't want to wear that on the day of judgment. So I wanted to clarify that. Yes.
A dog licked my food and then he licked my hand. So I got to wash both, right?
Yes.
Okay. But I'll still.
If you consider the dog licking to be najis, then yes, you have to use a little bit of dirt and wash it off 7 times. The proof of Imam Ahmed.
The proof of Imam Malik.
The proof of Imam Malik is a dog is not najis based on 2 hadith in the ayah. The 2 hadith is Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam would use the dogs to slaughter the animals and bring the animals so you can eat it. If the dog was najis and his mouth bit and killed, slaughtered the animal, then that's whatever is najis in the dog got into the meat. That's the argument of the Malikis, right? The second argument was, and this hadith in Sahih Bukhari, that the dogs would urinate and go in and out of the masjid during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and they didn't use water to clean it off. If you recall the hadith of the man who urinated in the masjid, Nabi ﷺ, they came and used water to what? Clean the area. Yet when the dogs did it, they didn't. Why? That's the argument of Imam Malik. Understand? Thank you. Any other questions?
Also, yes, you
Yes.
said it was 2 types of najasa.
No, I didn't say. I said Ibn Qudama said it,
Ibn
but he
Qudama.
only mentioned one.
Oh, he did.
So I'm
Okay,
only,
tight.
yeah, I only
That
read
was-
his statement.
Yeah, tight. Alhamdulillah, it was another statement.
But they do say 2 types. I'm sorry, we did say it. Najis and what? Muhdith. Or maybe that's what he was referring to. Allahu alam. Allahu alam. I don't know. Yes.
What was the hadith?
Which one?
The hadith, the ayah.
It's in Surah Al-Thamaraat, verse number 4. Look it up.
No, but you also said that the mu'dath, right? That it can't be najasa.
Well, that's why I said scratch that. That's why I said I don't know, because I actually read from Ibn Qudama, but he didn't mention the second part, and I didn't look for it. Or rather, it was mentioned in the couple pages down, but we didn't go that far.
Jazakallah khair.
Hayakallah. Any other questions? So then, Zub the Kalam. Zub the Kalam, meaning summarization of what we're talking about. Today's whole class was about removing impurities, right? The first type of impurity, we mentioned 4 ways to remove impurities. If it's a baby, if a baby urinates and the baby boy, it's a baby boy that urinates and he didn't reach the age where he's eating solid foods and he's still breastfeeding. Then it says yandha or nadh, meaning you sprinkle the water on it. You sprinkle the water. That's the first type. What's the second type?
Washing it one time.
Yes. Let's say there's impurities in a place or location, right? We take those impurities and we cleanse it by doing what? Pouring water on it one time, washing it one time. That's 2. What's the third one? A pig or a dog. If a dog or a pig saturates something in any way, you first clean it with dirt and 7 times you wash it. And then we added to that, even if a dog licks your skin, your hands, your legs, and this is based on the fiqh of Imam Ahmed. And then the reason why I mentioned Imam Malik's position, because I understand that where we live, that issue may be problematic because many Muslims live in places where there are dogs. And if you hold the position that the dog is najis, it may be a lot of hardship on a lot of people. So then it's only right to mention another position as well, even if you don't agree with it, but understand that there's something else and there's evidence to support it as well, right? And then the other part is anything that is not considered a dog or a pig, if it's impure, you clean it 7 times. Some of the scholars say 3 times, and some of the scholars say 1 time. Without dirt. Any questions? All right. Any questions about the dog?
You said even if it, like, say if a dog brushed against you, or it gotta be like.
So they say, even the ones who consider a dog to be najis, they say if it's dry, then it's a possibility that the najasa will not get to you. But if it's wet, for sure. Does that make sense? So it's deep. It's a deep. When we were living in Saudi Arabia, this wasn't an issue. It was whatever. I don't see dogs. Whatever. And when you come back here, force you to hold. Wait a minute. I got to go back and research this. And when I always remembered the position of Imam Malik. The Maliki usul fiqh is very nice. It's very nice. In fact, I think it's something that a lot more brothers in the state should study. So that way we can other brothers study Maliki fiqh, usul, we study Hanbali usul, bring it together and look at the different nuances of how we look at things in the deen. But at any event, the dog, right? The issue of the dog is a very important issue that affects a lot of people. So that's why I thought it was important to mention. All right. We good? Any other questions? All right, we're going to close out, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام ورحمة الله. أذن يا شيخ. Huh?
I said, that was more times. I like
Nah, I'm in
bring a different,